My name is Gannen Cogswell, and I have the privilege of teaching these amazing computer science students. I'd like to thank Representative Wheatley for taking the time today to answer some questions that these students have prepared. Representative Wheatley, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we can get on with those questions. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Cogswell, and thank you, students, computer science students. It is my pleasure to be here. And this is the third time that I've been before the Ignite Institute, and have had the privilege and the honor to speak to our younger citizens, not quite voting yet, but hopefully soon you will be. And there's even been some recent talk about lowering the voting age from 18 to 16. So not to get hopes up, but to hope to really get you interested in what you're about to embark on as an adult. This is a great opportunity to do that, and I'm glad to do it. So a little bit about myself. I am the twice elected state representative for the 65th district, and that district has changed its boundaries recently. The district has changed its boundaries recently. It now includes most of Covington, all of Park Hills, all of Fort Wright, most of Edgewood, and about half of Crestview Hills. So I'll do a quick, anybody from those cities in the audience? Any of those cities? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And myself, I was twice elected to the previous 65th district, so when I run this time, it'll be in the new 65th district, and I'm honored to do so. I am a retired firefighter, Covington firefighter, fourth generation, which means my father was a firefighter. Actually, my brother was a firefighter also. My grandfather was a firefighter in the city of Covington, and my great-grandfather was a firefighter in the city of Covington. So a long history of public service. But actually, I started off when I went to University of Kentucky. I got a journalism degree. Started in the newspaper business, which is those old things that we actually had papers that were delivered to people's homes. You see that sometimes now, but it's not as common. And was very much interested in journalism and good reporting of facts. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Did that for a few years when the fire department test was available, and I took that test and was honored to participate in a very rewarding career as a firefighter. Was fortunate enough to move up through the ranks, as they say, and by the time I got close to retirement, I did become the fire chief for the city of Covington. And that was also an important part of my development as a leader. And prior to becoming the fire chief or even considering the fire chief, I had entered into law school. I knew that as a firefighter, you frequently are younger than most people when you retire, and I wanted to do something after I retired, and I decided I would become an attorney for firefighters and public servants and first responders. So I was interested in that type of career. The fire chief's position became available. I became the fire chief. So I was in law school and the fire chief at the same time, which was a very hectic and busy time. After I did retire from the fire department, I practiced law on behalf of firefighters. I'm general counsel for the Kentucky Professional Firefighters. I have done that kind of work for a number of years and was involved in some of the legislative work that firefighters get involved in, and that included some work in Washington, D.C. and in Frankfort, Kentucky, because federal laws and state laws affect firefighters' jobs, and they're very important, particularly the safety of firefighters. So as I was in Frankfort a number of times, I became very familiar with the Kentucky General Assembly, the legislative branch of our government in Kentucky, and I became very familiar with some of the state representatives, like our state representative at that time was Representative Arnold Simpson, who represented Covington, primarily Covington, the old 65th district, and consulted with him a number of times, and when he did announce his retirement, I did run for that seat and was elected, like I said, 2 times, 2018 and 2020. And you might notice I'm a little bit older than most people when they get into politics, but politics to me is public service. And running for office was kind of like an extension of the work I did as a firefighter. And I'll talk a little bit more about public service probably through some of the answers, but those things were very important to me. Very important to me also at that time. We'll talk about this a little bit perhaps. What is the pension system, the retirement system that Kentucky has for its firefighters, hazardous duty employees, non-hazardous duty employees, teachers, state police. The pension system was not in very good shape on a financial level, and I did become very involved in that as a state legislator, and I'm very proud of the fact that the pension crisis, as that word has been used in the past, has calmed down some. It's still a lot of work to do to make sure we keep our retirement system very well funded. I know these things are well out of the range of thinking as a freshman in high school. I certainly wasn't considering that. But it won't be long, and you will, and your parents will, and it's really important to have that kind of security. Now, I could talk about a few other things that are important to me as a legislator, and they were things that I have worked on since I've been in the General Assembly. One of the things I'm most proud of is being a collaborative type legislator, working across the aisle, being a common sense legislator. So I didn't really go into the state and to become a state representative to particularly work on one issue because I was really angry about something, or I go into another issue because that was my one and only passion. My passion is for public service and to do well for all of Kentucky. And while I represent the 65th district, which is the northern tip of Kentucky, I'm very proud of that and work very hard for my district. We all have to keep in mind that Kentucky is 120 counties with 4.5 million people, and every decision we make affects the whole state. So those are very important macro level things that we all have to understand as state legislators. So with that, I'll be quiet for a little bit, and I'll welcome the first or the next question if that's what's next.
Hi, my name's Emma Scherff. So, as you know, Roe v. Wade was recently overturned, and with that came lots of concerns about state trigger laws. So, according to NBC News, one trigger law in Kentucky straight out bans abortion, while another bans abortion once the fetus's heartbeat is detected. So my question for you is, do you have any plans to change these trigger laws or any ways to provide a safer space for people searching for an abortion?
Thank you, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Emma Scherff.
Emily?
Emma.
Emma. Well, thanks, Emma. Okay. Well, straight into one of the most important topics of this election, and really on a national level, because Roe v. Wade was struck down by the Dobbs decision, something that I'm not very happy about, and I believe that women's access for health care should be there as an opportunity, as something that will, for the mental health and physical health of all women and all of society. It's very important. So the trigger law, one of my very first votes as a legislator was to vote on the trigger law, which I voted against. There are many complicated things that happen as a legislature. And when one party gets in power, they put a lot of legislation in front of us legislators that makes us vote on certain things we necessarily don't want to vote on. For instance, for me, abortion was taken care of to a level that was acceptable, a common sense way that we could have abortion available as health care for the women who would make that choice. And there was a number of bills that went too far and continue to go too far, banning all availability for abortion in the state of Kentucky. And I will work, if I am reelected, to make it a more common sense choice. I will work with the other side on this issue to say, let's figure out a way, like all of our constitutional protections, let's figure out a way to do this a way that we can be accepted and on all levels. And yes, you're going to have some people on the very far right and the very far left who won't like it, but the great majority of people will be satisfied with it, and that's what we need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Hello, my name is Evan Ralston. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic led to the loss of many jobs throughout the nation and state. As stated in an article by the University of Kentucky in 2021, Kentucky is 46th in the nation for workforce participation. How do you plan to help improve Kentucky's economy?
Well, thanks, Evan. And that is a workforce participation is one of the most dire situations that Kentucky is dealing with, and being 46 in the state. Now, being 46 of all the states. Understand, though, ranked 46th, all the rankings between number 10 and number 50 are very close. So that goes up and down quite a bit for a number of reasons over time. But I believe your question was directly related to the economy and what to do about the economy. And I don't know if that's directly related to inflation, but I can tell you this, that for me, I believe an economy that works for everybody. And working for everybody would be better workforce participation. Our schools are critical to the long-term investments that we make in our economy, because the workforce comes from the people in society who have been through school and have to be work ready by the time that they enter the workforce. Our workforce participation number is also affected by who can actually get to work. So can you get to work if you are a 35-year-old woman, a single mother who has 3 children and 3 young children? Well, that participation depends on, can she get to work? Is there child care available? Is there transportation available? All of these things play into the factor of workforce participation. So for me, universal pre-K, which would be 4-year-olds having the ability to go to school through public schools, is something that I support. I support a lot of other initiatives that make it easier for women to enter the workforce. I support other legislation that would make it easier for people of color to have transportation to the workforce. These are very important. And one last thing is that one thing we struggle with is former felons who can enter the workforce and vote. We need to make sure that those felons have the availability to vote, because right now in Kentucky, it doesn't matter what the crime was, but when you serve your time, do everything, you go back into society, you cannot vote in the state of Kentucky according to our Constitution. One of only 2 states that do that. The rest of the states permit former felons to vote. And if we allow our felons to vote, they become more involved in society, less likely they're going to get involved in crime, and that includes their workforce participation. Another thing that happens with former felons, if you have to check a box, because some applications say, are you a felon? If you check that yes box, they almost have very little chance of getting the position. So those are some things that I would do for the economy and for workforce participation. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marlee Collins, and with the recent passing of a Senate bill that actually bans trans athletes from participating in high school activities and sports, I was wondering, what are your thoughts on this issue, and what does this say about the future of trans athletes?
Well, I voted against that bill. And one thing you should know about me, and I didn't mention this in my introduction, is that I have coached high-level women's, girls soccer. I coached for a number of years, and I mean the highest level. A lot of my players went on to have Division I scholarships. And this is something I mentioned on the floor of the House of Representatives, is that if I were to poll the girls that I coached and said, do we need to ban transgender people playing in soccer or playing sports, I would have had a universal no. We don't need to do that. But the particular reason I don't support any trans bans at this point has to do with, we have athletic associations. You probably have heard of the NCAA. You may have heard of the Kentucky High School Athletic Associations. They have rules, and they are already dealing with this. And it is an issue that is so rare, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there are like 550,000 NCAA athletes and about a dozen situations where there's a transgender person involved. So in my opinion, look, fairness is important. We all know we kind of are born with an innate sense of fairness. And we know that if somebody is just in this for just that reason, that they want to excel and be better than everybody in sports, that is so incredibly rare. Almost, I don't know if it's ever truly happened that way. Transgender athletes and transgender people who identify that way is a very difficult position to be in anyway, and we don't want to affect their mental health in a way that we want to ban them from participating in something as important as athletics. And I think it was a real tragedy that we did that. We're even dealing with an issue that, in my opinion, is a non-issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Samuel Basinger, and
Samuel?
yes,
Thanks.
and for every 100,000 Kentuckians, 930 are incarcerated. However, in California, for every 100,000, 310 are incarcerated. These rates are due to recent bills and laws being passed. And my question was, do you have any ways or ideas to lower these rates or minimize the sentencing for these people?
Thank you for the question, and I can do a little bit more into the numbers. Kentucky, unfortunately, is imprisons more women than any other state on a percentage level, as you were just stating. So, in my opinion, this gets back to the felony issue. Being charged with a felony is a very serious crime, and we have in our criminal code too many areas, particularly in the drug offense area, where we have listed as a possible felony. And another thing that happens in our criminal justice system is that we have you probably have even seen it on some of the law shows or the TV shows where there are plea deals. And frequently, the people who are taking these deals, who are involved in criminal activity that may not rise to that high of a level, will take a plea deal not understanding how serious a felony is for the rest of their lives. And my position as a legislator has been to lessen the amount of felonies that we have in the state. Now, there are areas where there are times that I've actually voted to increase felony positions, and that has to be very specific to the incident that we are increasing the punishment level for. But for me, we do it too much. We have too many felony crimes, particularly in drug enforcement, and particularly related to cannabis or marijuana. And that's where I think there's a great, way too many people in our prison system, or have been in our prison system, related to this substance that has been considered a Schedule I drug for more than 70 years, and we have fought this war on drugs, and incarcerating people is not the answer.
Yes, thank you.
My name is Anthony Jackson. Year to year, inflation has of course been increasing, but inflation has increased 8% by the month of July, and it's been even difficult for families to catch up with this inflation. The average, or medium wage for an adult in Kentucky is around $40,000. And for this year, $80,000 is the average price for 2 adults and 2 children to pay just for living expenses alone. So my question is, what will you do with the rising prices in Kentucky, and as well as the families having hard times for?
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, inflation is a big issue right now, and what we might recognize is, and you may not recognize, is that when you are as advanced in years as I have been, we have experienced inflation a number of times over the years, and typically inflation comes about from such a multitude of factors that you can't really blame one particular thing or another thing. And what I said recently, sitting on a panel with a bunch of my Republican colleagues, is that anybody who says this inflation is related to Democrats or related to Republicans, they're blowing smoke. Because this particular inflation is very much related to a couple things. We've just come through a pandemic, and we're not all the way through it. And the pandemic caused us such a disruption in our supply chain. Our supply chain. People did not work, not only in this country, but they weren't at work in many other countries where they supply some of the important things that we need to keep our economy rolling. That was one factor that has affected inflation. When there's low supply, that causes the prices of those items to go up, okay? The other factor is fuel cost. And unfortunately, this country is too dependent on fuel, on carbon-based fuels. So what's going on in Europe and Russia and the Ukrainian war and Russia's invasion of Ukraine is that there's been an embargo, or we are looking at Russia as somebody we don't want to finance their war as they invaded Ukraine. So we don't we've cut off that supply line of our fuel. So the Russian war, the aggressive war of Russia, and the pandemic created this inflation that has happened. So you probably, those are the causes. What are the answers? The answers are really, really multifaceted, and not very many things that we can do just within the state of Kentucky, because as you can see, the economy is so worldwide dependent. We do have a global economy. And perhaps what we should look at are ways that we aren't so dependent on international partners when it comes to the economy. We can be if it is something that will keep prices down, but we don't have to be in a way that when it comes to situations like this, we are so dependent that it raises the prices of everything, and inflation is part of that. And it's very unfortunate that we are at $40,000 that you mentioned as the average income in the state of Kentucky. That's the state of Kentucky. In the rest of the country, it's closer to $56,000. So increased wages, all those things that make for a better economy, is building the economy from the bottom up. And there's some think that building the economy from the top down, give the wealthy the tax cuts and that dollars will trickle down. That's not me. I think we build the economy from the bottom up, and that starts with education and good paying jobs, and that's what I'll support as a state legislator.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Caiden Boyer, and my question today is, teacher pensions in Kentucky are in a rough spot currently. So my question is, what do you plan to do to fix teacher pensions in Kentucky?
Caiden, you just asked a question that I could talk about the rest of the day, all day. As you may have heard, I was interested in becoming a legislator related to the pension crisis. And part of the pension crisis, as it has been tagged at times, has to do with the teachers, because there are multiple pension systems within the state of Kentucky. And the teachers have their own pension system, the state police have their own pension system, and there are 3 or 4 other ones. So teacher pensions are very important, and for a number of reasons. As you probably know, our teachers, whether they're in the private sector or the public sector, whether they're collegiate level, college level, elementary school, preschool, high school, do not get paid very well. They get into the profession primarily because they love it. They love kids, they love education, they recognize how important it is, and I think I do too. I treasure my education, which was both private school as an elementary school, public school as a high schooler, and public colleges. I treasure my education, and I recognize that we need to treasure our teachers. And our teachers can be, and the best way to do that, I think, is give them everything they need as teachers, but when they are put in all of their years. Let's give them a secure retirement. And that's what this question is about, Caiden, is how do we make sure that our teachers have a secure retirement system? And I have been on the Public Pension Oversight Board. As soon as I got to Frankfurt, I was named to this prestigious board because I had some interest in and had some involvement in pensions and what's best for the pension system. And the easy answer is we just put more money into it, put more money into the pension system. But that's not always possible, because when we put more money into the pension system, we have less dollars to spend on public school transportation or public school books or our prison systems or our health care. So the pension system and a good teacher's pension is critical to recruiting and retaining our best teachers. And that's why we have to have a solid system that's on a solid ground. And I think that's what I'm very proud to say, Caiden, is that I've been able to help secure the teacher's pension system, and we'll keep it that way. You know, I'll say real quickly, my beautiful wife is in the audience, and she told me a little story about 5 years ago where she was she's a college professor, and she was just at the healthcare, where you work out. And one of the students there said, yes, I'm a teacher, I'm getting ready to graduate. And my wife said, oh, I hope you're coming to Kentucky. We really need good teachers. And she said, Kentucky? Who would want to teach in Kentucky with their pension crisis? And that was very disturbing to me. And it gave me some impetus to say, we've got to change that message. So Caiden, I want you to understand, and everybody else here to understand, there's not a crisis going on with the teachers' pensions. We need to continue doing what we're doing to keep them funded, and we will. And so far, there's been a commitment from both parties to do that. We're going to continue doing that, and as long as I'm there, I'm going to battle to make sure that we continue funding the teachers' pension system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Darren Ashcraft.
David?
Darren Ashcraft.
Dana?
Darren.
David, okay.
There was a shortage of 5,391 registered nurses and licensed practical nurses in the state's hospitals. My question for you is, what can you do to help with this shortage?
Okay, so David's question's about the nursing shortage. And I'm not the best person in the room to answer this question. As I mentioned, my wife is a nurse faculty at the University of Kentucky, and she's very in tune with this. But it makes me in tune because we talk about it all the time, and it's a serious question. As you may have noticed during the pandemic, it seemed to be on the news a lot that we didn't have enough nurses, we didn't have enough healthcare workers to really take care of all the people who needed it. But this problem, this nursing shortage, existed well before the pandemic hit. The nursing shortage was here recognized a couple decades ago. Some of the leading nursing organizations were saying to the leaders of our country that we've got a nursing shortage. We need 1 million more nurses than we currently have. And that's an onion to unpeel that has a lot of layers. So first of all, we need to make nursing, we need to lift up nursing as the incredible, sacrificial, it's not a good word, profession that it is. And what we have to recognize is the healthcare experts that nurses are. We have to make the job more attractive for people to want to enter that part of the workforce. And like teachers, like firefighters, there's passion there. People who do want to help. And one way we can do it, and there's been a number of ideas that have gone out there, is that we make it easier and quicker to get through school, to get through the training and the schooling that we need to graduate our best nurses. But there's a catch to that. We want to make sure they have the highest quality of schooling and training, that they're ready to be those experts that they are, those leaders that they are when they get out into the healthcare profession. So here's what I say when this comes up on the floor or in committees in Frankfurt, I say, let's let the nurses tell us what they need. What's happened for too long, there are hospitals, physicians, administrators, insurance companies, and politicians are saying, here's what we need to do about the nursing shortage. We haven't listened enough to the nurses. And that would be my number one focus and will be my number one focus to what we should do about the nursing shortage.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Hello, my name is Andrew Johnson, and so the Kentucky House endorsed legalizing the use of medical marijuana, recently passing a bill strictly to regulate the use of cannabis for a list of medical conditions. Do you believe that marijuana will benefit the people in need of health care?
I'm sorry, I'm Andrew Johnson,
Yes,
and you were the 16th president of the United States?
indeed.
No. This isn't very easy for me, and I'm a strong supporter of medical cannabis. And the reason that we did pass it, and I voted for it 2 times so far in the House of Representatives to allow medical cannabis. Now, I can say that when I became interested in politics maybe 6 or 7 years ago, the passage of recreational medical cannabis wasn't high on my list, but as I've become a legislator and heard all of the evidence that is out there and all of the positive things that can come from the use of medical marijuana and medical cannabis, the evidence has become overwhelming to me that yes, we should permit it. There are a number of ailments, and I don't even want to go through them because I don't want to leave any off that are important to ease the suffering, because this is almost needless suffering in the state of Kentucky because we're one of the few states who do not have any version of medical or recreational cannabis in our society. So I'm a strong supporter of bringing medical cannabis. I believe the recent numbers from the governor's task force that has studied this issue is like 90-something% of Kentuckians support allowing medical cannabis to be part of treatment. So I'm also very supportive of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brenden Lawson, and
Go ahead, Brendan, because I got my notes if you get ask a tough one.
the number of annual job openings in Kentucky for educators with at least a bachelor's degree will include 2,200 jobs that won't be able to be fulfilled due to the national teacher shortage. And my question is, what are your thoughts and actions will be to solve this problem?
Okay, so it sounds like your question is related to we don't have enough teachers and how do we recruit and retain? Those are 2 phrases you'll hear a lot about the workforce. First, you got to recruit them, get them to come to want to be, in this case, teachers, and then how do we keep them as teachers? So we have talked about some of the things that we need to do to recruit and retain our teachers. We have this shortage because we have workforce shortages in a lot of places. And this gets a little bit into the whole issue of work, which is different than it was when I was your age and sitting in an assembly room as a freshman. There were certain things that was the national way of thinking about you get out of high school, you either go to college or you go to work, and you do it right away, and you work real hard at one job, stayed in one position your whole life, and then you got a retirement, and you went through retirement. People today are thinking a little bit different, and that has to do with the way that we experience the world and the way that we are educated right now. And your job isn't everything. It's not your life. There are other really important experiences that you want to have as an adult, and to have a fulfilling life. Well, one thing that I don't like that has happened too much, and it came up with the teacher pension crisis thing, is that we too frequently, you'll hear politicians and people on TV and too many people not lifting up the importance of public service, public workers like our teachers and private sector. But just the whole lifting up of the profession to recognize how important it is, how incredibly influential teaching is on our kids and all of society. One thing we do too, and this is something that's a very much of a societal issue, is that we ask too much of our teachers. Too many of our kids come into school, especially at very young ages, with too many tremendous needs. Everything from mental health needs to family issues going on, and there are many areas that prevent really robust educational opportunities for all of our kids. And I'm speaking to a group that is most likely doesn't experience that at all. And I can't speak about everybody individually, and I can tell you this, that I was very fortunate to be able to go through school with having a great family support, large family. We all got along very well. But right now in school, it's much more difficult, and it keeps teachers from wanting to stay in the profession. That's that retaining part that we need to do. And we just need to lift it up on all levels. And that's what I think will help retain the teachers once they're there. And of course, we have to have a solid teacher pension system so that when they're done, they're rewarded as they should be. And by the way, a lot of people don't get this little thing about pensions. Like me as a firefighter, I had to put my dollars into the pension system. And I had to trust them to do the investing that happens. And then when I retired, there was the return on the investment, and I got my retirement security. We do the same thing with teachers. We put that trust in there, and they put in a big chunk of their paychecks goes into their pension. So just wanted to add that point. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, too.
Hello, I am Nathaniel Angel, and around 2,000 people are hurt by guns each year in Kentucky. The rate of deaths by these dangerous firearms increased by 46% from 2011 to 2020. What is your stance on gun control, and what do you plan to do to stop these kinds of deaths in Kentucky?
Thank you, Nathaniel. And gun control is a big national issue, and it's an issue in Kentucky, of course. Everybody recognizes, I think we all recognize here, is the right to have a gun, or to bear arms, they say, is a constitutional right. But like all of our constitutional rights, none of them are absolute. And that means in all cases, no matter what. I usually use free speech as one of our bedrock constitutional rights that we all have. But right now, do you feel like you can get up and start shouting and screaming? You don't have free speech always at all times. When you're in school, you have to follow the rules of being in school. That's how society works. If you're in a crowded movie theater and somebody jumps up and screams fire, that's another free speech that's actually a crime. So you can't induce panic. So that you don't have free speech at all times. So for guns, for firearms, are we to allow to have any kind of gun, anywhere, at any time, any amount of ammunition? We need to have regulations. And there are many who think we don't regulate guns enough because, as we can see through the news, through what the statistics that Nathaniel just quoted, we have far too gun accidents, gun deaths, and we can do something about that. We need to have universal background checks is something I support. I also support a regulation, heavily regulating, not banning, but heavily regulating military-style assault rifles, automatic rifles, and ammunition, which is another important point. You know, some people do collect guns, and it's important. And some people, of course, they hunt. There are a lot of positive things that happen and also protecting your family with having a firearm or having guns. But there is too much of too much, and that's when we have to recognize common sense. This is another thing that I talk about a lot. Common sense regulations of guns will help bring down gun deaths and the accidents that happen. And we certainly recognize mental health is another way that we have too many gun deaths in this country, and the availability of mental health. And this is something that we haven't gotten too much into healthcare issues, is telehealth, which is a way that you can have a visit with a mental health expert online. You don't even have to go into the office to do it. We do that some with not just telehealth or mental health, but with physical health too. And this is something I've supported to really help with those areas, because unfortunately suicide is an issue really on all ages and all levels. And it's something that can be fleeting, meaning you can have the thought for just a short period of time, but if it can be interrupted, we could have a safe mitigation of that issue. So that's where telehealth and mental health issues come into play. I very much support that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elijah Harter. In the past few years, about 72% of adults have experienced healthcare affordability issues here in Kentucky. Because of this, 40% have delayed going to the doctor or having a procedure done, and 23% have cut pills to make a prescription last longer or skip doses. Now, high healthcare costs is clearly affecting the people in a bad way. What is your stance on what we should do to fix this situation?
Okay, I heard most of it, but I think really the genesis of the question really is about high healthcare costs and what can we do to fix it. Well, like a few other answers, most important to me is access to health care. Everybody has access to health care. You hear things talk about, well, that's my right to do this, or I have a constitutional right for that. And health care is not considered necessarily a constitutional right, but many people consider it a universal right. And I believe in that kind of right that, look, if you need health care in some way, it should be available. And not just on an emergency level. If you're not familiar with this, and I was a firefighter, and we had an ambulance service in Covington, as you're probably aware of ambulances. That is emergency care, where if we pick somebody up on an ambulance and take them to the emergency room, they're going to get care. That's the law. But a family who is perhaps doesn't have health insurance through their employer, they haven't signed up or qualified for the health insurance that currently is available through the Medicaid system, they are in this little area where they have to pay basically out of pocket. And as we know, it's much too expensive to have something like any kind of procedure at a hospital where you have to pay out of pocket. The healthcare system, the dollars, the ways that we pay for our healthcare is much greater in our country than any other country. And our healthcare outcomes are, I won't say much worse, but they're not nearly as good. So it's very concerning. So you take a country like Canada or Sweden or even Colombia, which is almost a third world country, and we don't use those terms as much as we used to. They have better healthcare systems. More people are taken care of. There is more free healthcare or very low cost healthcare that is available in other countries. So what can we do in Kentucky? In Kentucky, we have done incredible good work on this, and I can say this with some pride. The Democratic Governor, Andy Beshear, has reconnected something called Connect, where Medicaid is available to more Kentuckians. His father, Steve Beshear, Governor Beshear, when the Affordable Care Act allowed more people to come under the coverage of Medicaid about 10 years ago, Kentucky went from having 24% of the state not covered by health care to less than 10 through that program. And it was picked back up after the Bevin administration stripped it away. It was picked back up by Governor Beshear, and we do have more people coverage. We're not there yet because, as you were mentioned, it's still too costly. There's still too many ways to low or prices go up and go down that we don't have enough controls over. And this is people saying, well, should the government get that involved in our healthcare costs? Well, maybe. And this is where it's just that balance you got to find, the common sense balance. we don't have enough of that in Frankfurt, and that's why they should elect this Democrat.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Wheatley, if you have any closing remarks, you can go ahead, but thanks for taking the time today to answer these questions.
All right, well, thank you, and I want to thank the Ignite Institute, Mr. Smith, I don't think he was in the room, and all the students have helped out with the AV, that's what we called it anyway, and of course the questionnaires, and people who listened. If there are any other questions out there, I'll be around for a few minutes, but you guys are at a very important age, and we used to call it civics back in the day when we took as a freshman, we took these classes, and here I am 50 years later thinking, oh my goodness, if I only would have paid more attention, if I only knew those things. And what's really I'll even say a sad part of it, I wished everybody else had paid a lot more attention. The understanding of how our government works, as you'll find out, and you're being preached to right now, is if not one of the most important things you'll recognize as you advance through your education and through your work life. Understanding how everything works, because if you don't understand and you just want to complain, which we have way too much of right now, people don't understand how the government works and they complain about it. When they understand it, you recognize that's when you can problem solve. And that's what I feel like I can do as a legislator if I'm reelected. And I look forward to doing it. I work both sides, use common sense, and we solve the problems. That's what government can do. And one of my last messages will be this. Unfortunately, we had a president many years ago, he's a popular president, and he said something to the effect, not exact words, the government is the problem. I couldn't disagree more. The government doesn't have all the answers, and frequently, and almost most of the time, we need to let the private sector do it. But we need to make our government as good as we can possibly make it. I don't see the government as the problem. I see it as a partnership with the private sector to have the best society as possible, and that's what I'll work for as a state legislator. Thank you all.